Hello and welcome to HUDL Up, the podcast from HUDL where we're holding space for real stories, shared power and collective change. HUDL works alongside young people, organisations and communities to create fairer systems and better opportunities, not just for young people but with them, and this podcast is where those stories come to life. Each episode we'll hear from young leaders, practitioners and partners who are reshaping the way decisions are made and how programmes are designed. Together we'll explore what it takes to build equitable partnerships, share power meaningfully and create change that lasts. We believe that when young people are involved at every stage, from design to decision making to delivery, systems become fairer and communities become stronger. So let's huddle up and get started with today's episode. And our guests today are Louise Snelders from the Co-op Foundation and Keshon, Zak and Saffai, former members of the Future Communities Collective. Hi everyone.
Hi.
Hi, lovely to have you all. I've been looking forward to this conversation. So we're going to spend time talking about the impact and change and what happens next after the Future Communities Collective. So the first thing to do is to probably tell people what is the Future Communities Collective. And Louise, I'm going to come to you for that. So if you could tell us, why did the Co-op Foundation decide to work with young people and what is the Future Communities Collective?
Well, taking us back to 2022, we were developing our strategy, and part of that was looking at what we'd stood for thus far as a funder. So we're a grant maker and we're Co-op's charity. And also, what did we want to do more of? So looking at inequality that was really widespread and what impact that was having on young people in particular. And we worked with nearly 100 young people as part of the development of a Future Communities vision that was the precursor to the development of our strategy. And we came out with 6 strategic priorities that came from the conversations that we had with these 100 young people.
Mm-hmm.
And we were then thinking, okay, we want to launch our first strategic fund. How do we continue that conversation and involve young people in our work, in how we did grant making? And so we reached out to HUDL. We didn't know how to do that in terms of how did we find young people? How did we prepare them for the work that we were going to do with them? And we just sent out a message into the ether to HUDL, and you guys came back and were really supportive and welcoming, and helped us to recruit and support young people in helping us to work on this first strategic fund. So the collective at that point was, I think, about 12 young people we first started with.
Yeah, it was. And then we had a few people who stepped down in year one, and then we had like a smaller group. I think it was about, 6 of you, was it? Keshon, Zak, Saffai,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, so it will be really interesting to hear from your side. How do you describe the Future Communities Collective?
So I'm not going to go for a technical explanation at all, Louise. I will leave that to you. To me, the Future Communities Collective was an opportunity to, impact what services, or rather what's available to young people to engage in social action or in their interests and improve their communities by, making sound decisions in funds to the organizations that were demonstrating the best quality of engaging young people across. So I thought it was an amazing project to be a part of. So I thought, I want to be a part of it. And that's what it was to me at the time. I've developed a better understanding of what the project is about, but as I said, I'm not going to try and be technical here.
No worries, technical isn't needed. Louise, I want to come back to you and ask, when you first approached HUDL and also as the foundation, what did you hope the collaboration would achieve at the beginning in terms of working alongside young people and involving young people in your work?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Keji, I don't think that we really knew what it was we were looking to do, other than we knew we wanted to work with young people. We knew that there was something really important to do about shifting power. So as a grant maker, you get quite comfortable with just holding the power about making decisions. And we knew that we wanted to change that. We weren't obviously the first funder to do that, but we knew that there was something different about how we wanted to work. And there was some, I suppose I would describe it as discomfort in the power that was held as a funder. And we knew that we wanted to provide support to a group of young people. Honestly, I had no idea what that was going to look like. We knew that it might feel a little bit like an induction, it might feel like training, but we wanted them to feel by the time they finished whatever program it was we ended up giving them, we didn't know how long this would last for, in all honesty, beyond that first strategic fund that we were looking to work with them on. We wanted them to feel confident in making decisions, and not just in terms of funding, but a range of areas. And we probably thought that we were creating a group of young grant makers, if I'm being completely honest, that the ambitions that everybody had would be aligned to what we were looking to do, which is probably not the greatest starting position, if I'm being completely honest about it. But once we got to know the young people, we realised that they had their own ambitions, they had their own career paths. And while some of them are now interested in grant making, that wasn't necessarily why they got involved in the work that we were doing.
Yeah, no, understandable. And actually, that kind of leads me to my next question, which is Zak, Saffai, Keshon, when you first heard about this opportunity, what made you want to be part of the Future Communities Collective? What was the reason behind putting in your application and kind of getting stuck into this work?
Yeah, so for me, it was definitely when I read the description of the being part of the FCC, it really aligned with what I wanted to do in terms of, how Louise said, inequality and like that young people face and the large like disparity of like access to resources. I felt that as a young person.
Mm,
So I felt like joining the FCC would allow me to have a really good impact and a large impact on, tackling that issue. So,
mm.
yeah, I feel like joining the FCC really allowed me to, have an impact.
Fair enough. Thank you. Saffai, what made you take up the opportunity?
I think for me, it was more just about working with young people like myself. And even though I may have just to get involved in something new, and I've never had the opportunity to do grant making previously,
Mm,
but it was more about the opportunities, and then also using what my experience and my voice, and hear everyone out as well, and be able to work with the board members, HUDL and the co-op, all those kind of things, and just build on that and
mm.
and lead to making great decisions. So I think it was just more about that collaborative environment that co-op does offer.
Thank you, Saffai. Keshon, what about you? What was it that made you kind of take up the opportunity?
Well, I was interested in the grant allocation side of things because, I pay some attention to current affairs, I watch the news and follow politics. And one thing we hear a lot about is that, youth centers are underfunded, they're all disappearing.
Mm,
And having done similar work before, I realized that there are many organizations that are actually providing spaces for young people to be active and to engage, not just for their enjoyment, but for their development. And what I saw in the Future Communities Collective was an opportunity to continue that sort of work. But there was also an opportunity to see that young people were embedded in the development of the organizations that we were giving funding to. And that was something that is still something that I'm incredibly committed to, because I want to see that young people aren't just being given something to do, but craft future things for other young people, something that is relevant to them, something that will continue to hold their interests in future. So that's why I was interested in it.
Okay, so that's interesting, Keshon, and I actually want to kind of stick with you for a second. So those were the reasons why you were interested. At the start, what did you think your influence or your role would actually be?
Well, I thought it'd be superficial. I'm not gonna lie.
Really? Okay, tell me more. What do you mean? And
I,
why did you think that?
because I've seen enough organizations claim to have youth-led, projects and initiatives, and they bring in young people to what I will describe, but I will explain as rubber stamp the decisions that the
Mm,
senior staff make. And by that, I mean that they bring in young people and they say, okay, hey, we're going to do this thing. And, here's the description of it. Can you tell us what you think And then, the young people come in and give a full detailed explanation. They say, okay, great, that's good, and they continue on not having really engaged with the feedback at all, but they'll hand them a survey at the end to say,
Mm.
do you think can be improved? I'm sure they often respond to the survey, but there is no engagement with young people at the start. There's no engagement with young people in developing the project before it goes out in any meaningful way. When I joined the FCC and I know we started to work on things, I realized that, the co-op gave us all the decisions to make, obviously with guidance. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Whew.
It was a whoop. Zach, how about you? Like, you joined the
Yeah.
collective for all the reasons that you shared, but like, what did you think your influence would be? What did you think your role would actually be?
Yeah, well, to be honest, in contrast to Keshon's thoughts, I actually had no idea about the grant making sector. So I actually had no idea what my influence would be on my role. So I thought I was just thinking I'm just gonna go with the flow and see what happens, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that Co-op Foundation have given us so much power as a young person, and that's my first time being a part of something like this. That's what I expect. And when I kind of found out, like through Keshon and other from my peers, that there are organizations that young people don't have as much power as we was given, I was
Mm-hmm.
quite shocked, and I feel like that's what I expect young people given full decision making power, or at least a high standard of power to be
Mm.
able to make decisions that affect young people.
Mm. Thank you, Zach. So Louise, I want to ask you, so looking back, where have you seen the biggest impact of the collective so far on the foundation?
I mean, firstly, before I answer that, Keji, if I could just respond particularly to Keshon there, because I do think that both Keshon and Zach are being really generous in terms of the extent to which we immediately kind of handed over power, because I think there was a real warm-up process that we needed to go through. And the first time that we delivered a fund with young people, it was too fast. We asked people to get involved in really detailed work so quickly, and we learned from that massively. So I think the second time around, we've done it much more successfully, but the first time it was too fast and we learned loads. But in terms of the biggest impact of the collective so far, I mean, it has just completely invigorated everything that we do as a grant maker. It brings so much energy and is so refreshing in terms of the different perspectives. It forces you as well to be much more honest and transparent. So as a grant maker, a lot of what you do is behind closed doors. And aside from, regulators like the Charity Commission, there isn't anyone really looking over your shoulder saying, you shouldn't really be doing it like that, or why are you doing it like that? And suddenly when you open the doors and you've got young people involved in the work that you're doing, you have to explain the rationale behind why you're doing things in a particular way or why you've historically done them like that. And it does genuinely make you think really hard and really deeply. We have also found that a lot of the experiences that young people have had are much more relevant to the work that we're doing. So if we are working in communities that are experiencing particular challenges, our team haven't experienced those challenges. So if you've got young people who've got experiences that are much more relevant, then they bring insight that you are never going to have as a team. So it feels much more meaningful, and our work is so different as a result. We probably have most of our work now involving young people, not all of it. And that is genuinely deliberate. So we know that we don't want to overburden young people and get them involved in every single thing that we do, but we do our best to try and identify things like speaking events or offering training, just providing opportunities for people to get involved in as much of the breadth of the work that we're doing as possible. As long as it's of interest to them, I think that's the important thing as well. So it's not just what do we get out of it and we want you to do this, but also it's, are you interested in this and is it going to benefit you in some way? And I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind when you're involving young people.
So can I ask then, what feels different now because young people are part of the collective for you as an individual and also for like the team as well?
I mean, I think what feels different is just that sense of a new I guess it's a new dawn. It feels like it's a refreshed way of working where we got quite stuck in our ways as a grant maker and involving young people. You're having different conversations around a table. They are absolutely challenging us to think differently and deliver grant making completely differently. I think that's the real fundamental change from my perspective.
So back to the collective. When you all signed on, I remember, because we was in all of your interviews, this was meant to be like a 10-month, 12-month thing, right? And then 3 years later, you've just finished your term with the collective. So for you, what feels different from when you started to when you left?
From the start, like you said, Keji, it was meant to be a 1 year thing. It was kind of just, going with the flow. It was kind of like a pilot FCF1. So that was Future Communities Fund round one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about, I'd say 6 to 8 people, FCC members. And yeah, I feel like the start was kind of, just pilot. We came through some challenges, one challenge was having we faced so many applications and just navigating that. And I felt like because we were a small group, we kind of faced that challenge together and we were kind of a tight knit kind of group. And then as we transitioned, we were successful in FCF1, I'd say. And then we had this 1 year where it was like kind of in limbo, where we was like, it wasn't FCF1, but we got involved in various different things, such as like, online hackathon. And then we started to recruit like 10 new FCC members. And I felt like that was a drastic change where, the original FCC members kind of became like mentors and kind of involved in the recruitment with the FCC members. And that change really brought the vibe that FCC was established within the Co-op Foundation. And it's like a group where it wouldn't leave the Co-op Foundation and it will continue on. And I feel like that's the biggest change I felt like from the start to finish.
So that feeling of the collective being embedded within the foundation now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool, thank you. Keshon, how about you? What's changed in your perspective since year one?
As I said, when I first started, I found the amount of power that we were given somewhat overwhelming. But now, especially when you think about the size of the funds that we worked on, I've never seen £1 million in my life.
I've never seen £1 million in my life.
Not me.
When you see a figure like that, you think, "Ooh, responsibility." But now I feel more assured that I have the maturity and ability to handle decisions and justify those decisions in professional settings. Zach, mentioned something very interesting about what we've been working on, how we've been working, and that's the various other projects that's been attached to our work. So we haven't just been doing, grant allocation. We've been working on campaigns and, various things to do with marketing. And I think Zach knows a lot more than I do because you do some of those other projects. But I think that this project gave me and certainly the entire team an opportunity to become interdisciplinary in some form. We have been able to work on as many things as we find interesting. As I said, I've always been interested in policy, and we engaged very closely with youth justice policy with recent grant, and that was just incredibly refreshing for me. And I think that's where my development has taken me. It's taken a place where I feel sure that I have the ability to handle serious work.
And Saffai, how about you? What's different for you now from like year one to year three?
Each stage we've learned a lot. So like during the first stage, we've had a lot of challenges, but we were able to grow from that. And then looking back now in terms of FCC2, having those one-to-one interview calls with them, that was really nice. And I remember during the first stage, it was also similar process, but we were able to actively go and meet the grant makers and see what project. But I think back then I didn't really know the behind the scenes in terms of what was going on. It was nice to get invited, but I feel like this time around we were able to actively look at the organizations, but also hear from their mentees and the young people within the organization, and for them to also provide like their own testimony about how that has changed and made an impact in their lives. So I'd say we've definitely grown in terms of that. And just getting involved in general has just been so amazing, I'd say.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on something. All of you have said something around like there were challenges. So I'm really curious to know a little bit more, like what were the challenges that you experienced, either for yourself kind of in this space or kind of within the whole process? What were the challenges for you and how did you overcome them, if at all?
I think the challenge that we can all relate to is managing our lives as either students or professionals with this work. It's a serious time demand. Yes, we meet on a scheduled basis, but we're often given tasks to do in our own time, and there's an expectation that things are done to deadline. And, working in this way makes it very important that you know how to handle your diary.
Diary
Um,
management is important.
It is important and something that I'm still learning. But, that's been the main challenge for me, because student life, I was at university when I first started, is all about, independent study. I was also working, in a slightly more organized shift, in organized shifts per week. And, I had this. And there's a certain amount of discipline expected of oneself in order to ensure that things are done on time and at an appropriate standard. So I think that's a challenge we can all relate to.
Zak, Saffai, Louise, any challenges that you want to share?
I think for me, because it was an area that I wasn't really familiar with in terms of like youth, where is it more on governance and youth development as well, and leadership. In terms of that, I wasn't really familiar with, but it was nice to hear and see how that with the organizations and the work that they do, it was nice to see what that means and what that means for myself as well. Just get involved into something like this. That's youth development and leadership. So I'd say maybe just the key areas and the focus, despite me may not having much familiarity with that. But yeah.
Thanks. Zak, how about you?
I'd say, like, personally, coming in to the FCC space, I wasn't familiar with the space. My first challenge was probably overcoming nerves, being in a space with brilliant minds and confidence, and I wasn't as confident. So just overcoming that challenge of, telling myself that I deserve to be in this space and I am valuable, which was, I feel like was like an invaluable lesson for me to realize that, and I feel like I've grown a lot from entering like a space like this. And also, what else I found challenging was like, dealing with opposing ideas and thoughts to mine, and finding a way to articulate my thoughts and ideas in a way that's respectful, and really, really having an open mind and being open to having your mind changed, I feel like is really something I've learned. And going on forward, I feel like is really valuable for me. I feel like, I've learned a challenge, like I'd say FCC wise, how we dealt with like hurdles, working with the Court Foundation and HUDL, together, even though, like Keshon mentioned, we worked and met often in the evenings. So, Court Foundation, giving up their time in the evenings to meet with us, and HUDL as well, in the evening. So it was I'd say a challenge navigating, working with a Court Foundation and bridging that gap. But I feel like overcoming the challenges that we faced and working together well, I feel like was really beneficial and really contributed to the success of the FCC and the Court Foundation.
Thank you. Keshon, there was a point in something Zak was saying about like managing or dealing with like opposing viewpoints. I felt like I saw a reaction there. So do you want to say a little bit more?
I literally wrote that exact phrase.
I thought so. I was like, yeah, I want to hear what you have to say about that. Like, how do you manage that in spaces like this?
Well, I think we need to give HUDL your props, because, we spent a lot of time in training going through how to handle situations where there is disagreement in the room, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We spent a lot of time discussing holding space for each other, talking about, you know, how to think the best of what is being said. And instead of pushing back, instead, you know, take the approach of, you know, informing the conversation in such a way that ideas aren't being battered away. And I think that the team has done that incredibly well. Because there are moments, especially during, you know, the final decisions, you know, actually all decisions, we've gone off and done our own research, and we've come back with ideas that simply don't match with what someone else has found out, or
Or the criteria, right? The criteria that you would set
right.
often.
Actually on the criteria, yeah, exactly. You know, what we would prioritize, you know, as a team. And it's interesting because we spent a lot of time debating, you know, language. You know, I remember when we were dealing with the criteria, we even spent a lot of time leaving comments in an Excel spreadsheet, I believe, it was, on how things should be.
Excel, Word, Slack.
How things should be phrased and what we want to remain in the criteria. And I think it takes a certain level of maturity that organizations probably don't expect people of our age group to simply let go of the things that we hold dearest. I think our generation is known for, you know, dying on the hill.
Dying on the hill.
We definitely don't like to let go of things. But I think that, you know, because of the training that we've had, we've learned to, you know, really engage with ideas in a very good way, because, you know, the decisions that we make have a serious impact on organizations. You know, if you make the wrong decision, then we might find for the criteria, for example, an organization might fall out of eligibility because of us being too laxed with how we go about putting them together. So yeah, I think that is a very, you know, important point raised by Zak there.
I think that's a real tough one as a funder as well, when you try and go over everybody's comments and get them to a place where it's coherent, because ultimately when you're publishing assessment criteria, somebody who's applying needs to be able to read those criteria and understand what it is you're looking for. So there's a real challenge in trying to read through all of those comments and get them to a place where not only do you get agreement, and this is where HUDL support has been really pivotal, but also get the criteria to a point where they're clear for people to read and understand them. And, you know, there's lots that everybody has talked about there that resonates with me. I think the confidence point that Zak's talked about, that comes from both sides. Definitely there were collective members who struggled with self-confidence, but equally our team, there were myself and another colleague, Wendy, who were in a lot of the earlier sessions when we ran our first strategic fund, Future Communities Fund round 1. And then when we've done the second round, there's been a lot more people involved. And we have absolutely struggled with asking people to join evening sessions, people's availability, asking people to join weekend retreat sessions or all day Saturday sessions. We are a team who are contracted to do essentially 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So you are very reliant on the goodwill of team members being flexible, changing their working patterns, taking a break in the middle of the day. But to be honest, the biggest challenge has been that we really want people to take time in lieu when they've built up time working outside of their core hours, and people not wanting to take that time because they've got FOMO. They don't want to miss out on another session that's taking place, or they don't want to hand over responsibility to someone else to take a turn, because people want to be in there and they don't want to miss the conversations that the collective were having. And that has been one of the biggest and maybe surprising challenges that we've had, is just more and more people wanting to be involved in this work and us not being able to have everybody involved because it's too much.
I think that's definitely one of the conversations that you and I have had sort of from year 1 through to now, right, Louise, which is just kind of like, there is a lot of enthusiasm across the foundation to work with the collective, but it's also trying to make sure that like we're not overwhelming the collective and that we're actually putting forward things that the collective actually wants to be involved in, but also really thinking about how to involve them in the work. And that's something that we've had to navigate alongside them as well, right, over the last few years.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
listened to a podcast that you were part of probably 2 or 3 years ago, Keji, and you said something about young people being a precious resource. And it was something that really stuck in my mind and has been something that I've often repeated back to my team saying, no, we have to think about young people as a precious resource because, you know, as Keshon mentioned, you know, they've got really busy lives, and that's why we have to be very cautious around not involving them in everything that we would want them to be involved with, but just thinking about, you know, where are the things that they can add most value or that they'd be most interested in being involved with, and get them involved there. And some things we just can't afford to have young people involved in.
But I guess that also comes with like, I think, and Keshon, Zak, Saffai, you know, correct me on this, but I think that that comes from spending a longer time period with young people involved in the work to better understand them as individuals and what they're interested in and what they want to impact in order to be able to best determine like what do we put in front of them in terms of opportunities, or actually do we just share everything and then just really listen to what is it that they want to be involved in? Keshon, Zak, Saffai, I don't know if there's anything that you want to kind of say to that.
Well, I have a question.
Go
So
ahead.
the question is, you know, it's great that we're having more organizations, especially the co-op, is involving young people. But my question to Louise and you, Keji, is how do you decide what young people do when you involve them? Because I imagine there's a great deal of risk involved in, or at least there's a fear of a risk that young people won't be able to meet the quality expectation of what the organization's used to putting out. So what do you do to ensure that, you know, what young people are doing is at the standard that you expect, and how do you decide what they are involved in, or is that not a concern?
I would like to push that back to you and ask you, how do you think you were supported into this role in order to make sure that you were delivering this work, right? Because you've already said it's not about being lax, especially when it comes to doing the criteria. It's about approaching it with a level of maturity. It's about training. So I will push that back to you, Keshon. Like, what do you feel happened for you in this journey?
Well, I think that there was a lot of training involved, you know, a couple of months on training itself. But I think my question goes deeper than that. You know, it's not how do you, or maybe I'm doing a poor job of phrasing. It's not how do you ensure that the quality is up to standard. It's more so how do you choose what we are involved in?
It's easier when it's a new fund,
Yeah.
was I would say from that point of view. And maybe there's a perception, and perhaps there are other funders out there who are policy experts in everything that they deliver within their funding portfolio. We are not one of those funders who necessarily has expertise in everything. So there is always an element of education that happens at the launch of a new strategic fund or when you're coming to work on a new policy area. So the FCC were just another group of people who were not familiar with a particular policy area or not familiar with research or an evidence base around a particular area of work. So then had to learn. And we, you know, for Future Communities Fund Round 2, which was around organisations with experience of working with young people who were criminal justice experienced, we as a team had to up our game in terms of our own understanding. And, you know, the sessions that we had where we had lived experience leaders come in and talk to us. We had chief execs of organisations who worked with young people who had that experience as well come in. So whatever the subject matter is, there is always a period of education, whether that's for the team or whether it's for a group of young people. And we have always just looked at it through a lens of the young people we're working with are just people who don't know so much about a particular topic, and we need to work with them to get them to a level of understanding. And the collective, you know, absolutely threw themselves into that, as you know, you were part of that and saw that from your peers as well, that everyone took that work really seriously. and really took the time and the energy to get under the skin of some of the issues that we were looking to talk about and needed to understand to make robust decisions.
Mm. I think, Keshon, in answer to your question, I think a lot of it comes down to time. It comes down to space for learning. It comes down to like space for open discussion. I think it also comes down to bringing in the experts, because you as an individual young person are not an expert in everything. You're not necessarily joining the collective to be representative of all young people. And it's kind of knowing like when we need to bring in those like new voices and those other lived experiences, and where we need to create those spaces to have those kind of exploration, essentially, right? And then I think it's also about transparency and being really clear about like the parameters. We always talk about red lines. What are the red lines? Like knowing what they are and then articulating that and sharing that with you as young people, and then sense checking it and going back and forth until everybody's got like an understanding of not only the task, but also the how are we going to do it. And what is needed to do that, right? And that all takes time. And I think more often than not, it can't happen in a few months, especially when it comes to a new fund. And I think we learned that really quickly with FCF1, right? And we went slower for FCF2. You know, we've taken a lot longer, but actually, because we've taken a lot longer, we can speed up again because we now know like where we need to pause, and we now know a little bit better in terms of what information we need to give beforehand and how to prepare people in this space.
And I think holding the responsibility for things that we should never be asking the collective to be responsible for, like being really clear about things like due diligence and the risk around funding organisations who maybe are newer or who have particular issues that we uncover through the due diligence process. It's important for our team, who are ultimately, you know, employed to do the grant making, to hold on to some of that, just being really clear about what are the things that we're asking the collective to make decisions on and what are the things that we are going to hold on to, and making sure that that conversation is had at a really early stage so everyone knows where their personal responsibilities lie.
Thanks for that juicy question, Keshon. Were you
Yeah.
going to respond to that?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that that's exactly why I asked, because we had a conversation about due diligence. But you know, I think that it's a very helpful answer, because I think that it's something that I like to see more organization replicate. Because even though, you know, Louise, you said that, you know, you gave us a lot of power at the start, you know, I still felt that in the second round we still had a lot of power to work with, you know, and I'd like to see more organizations replicate what you've done with the Co-op Foundation, so learning that you've had as an organization. And that's why I asked why, or rather, how do you do that? So, yeah, I think it's a very helpful answer. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Keshon. So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to bring in Saffai and Zak a bit more into the conversation. The question I have is, what surprised you most about how this work has unfolded?
So I would say definitely how close everyone became with each other. I felt like, you know, we definitely had a good diverse range of lived experiences and backgrounds, and we all brought something different. And I felt like that's what we really connected on. And I feel like that's what really was the biggest contributor to, you know, the success of the first round. I felt like a thing that surprised me was how much I learned, not just about the grant making sector, but about myself, about different people, different backgrounds. And I didn't really know how I could connect with so many people, but how so many different and brilliant people as well. And I felt like moving forward in my life and in my career, I have the ability to, you know, really connect with someone and have that empathy and just build really good, meaningful relationships.
Thanks, Zak. Saffai, how about you? What surprised you most about how this work's unfolded?
Yeah, I would just say just connecting with the FCC and the members and HUDL and the Co-op Foundation. It's nice that we've been able to actively make a decision and also put our ideas across and just achieve something great. Looking back, I would never have thought I would be part of like something like this or be involved in like the grant making sector, which is something I had no idea that even like maybe existed, or even just the work itself. It requires a lot. There's a lot of details and a lot of decisions that go into something like this. So I'd say that I've definitely surprised myself in terms of my confidence as well. That's also another thing that I'd say I've really, really built as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks, Saffai. Louise, I'm going to come to you with that question. So what surprised you most about this work as it's unfolded?
I mean, do I want to admit to this? Probably just how emotional it's been at times, Keji, and how personally invested I feel in seeing the transformation of individuals who have been involved from the start and the change in them. There have been, multiple conversations that we've had as a group where I have just felt really, really emotional. Tears have been shed in just hearing from people what impact this work has had on them. And as somebody who's been involved in grant making for, I'm just doing some quick maths in my head, 27 years, you get a little bit old and cynical about grant making, and this has completely fundamentally changed how I view this last stage of my career. It has been so much fun and enjoyment that I maybe never really necessarily expected when I began this process. So yeah, just really satisfying work to see everybody grow and to see the incredible contributions that people make and how much learning I have taken from this.
Amazing. Thank you. So I'm going to ask this next question. It's open to anyone to answer. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I said that Keshon, Zak, Saffai, that you are outgoing members of the collective. So the question I would like to ask is, how do we make sure the learning and impact that you had over the last 3 years doesn't disappear? We're due to start recruiting for some more members of the collective. Like, how do we retain all of that learning? How do we make sure that we are able to kind of share that impact with those who are incoming?
Yeah, I feel like definitely, sharing the work that we do and especially what the FCC do, I feel like sharing it well as well on social medias and various different things like capturing blogs of individuals' experiences of the FCC. I feel like all these things definitely just capturing the experiences of the FCC is really what will make it, would really further embed the FCC into the Court Foundation. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Keshon, what's your thoughts on that? How do we make sure we don't lose that learning and the impact that's been made in the last few years?
Well, I think that we're doing it right now. I think that it's important that we capture, the experiences as early as possible in long form, if possible, in a way that's like easily digestible on the go. And we all engage with social media in some form or fashion. So, I think documenting in bite sizes, the things that young people are doing on projects in specific detail, obviously making sure that protected data is protected, but documenting that in specific detail so that young people can learn from those who are working on similar issues, albeit in a different context. But that's what needs to happen, capturing information early and pushing it out there. And I think you're doing that now.
Thanks, Keshon. Saffai, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would have to agree. Just like continuing to have these conversations, and whether that turns into an alumni or maybe having a hackathon or type of project or work. I think just having those things in place it would be a great way to just connect with each other, whether that's new members, old members, or even like me, maybe even external people as well.
Great, thank you. Louise, what's your thoughts on this?
I think it's partly what's already been mentioned, which is opportunities for young people to tell their stories using their own voices. We have got an opportunity because we have a platform. So we have social media platforms, we have various different channels to tell stories, but also we get opportunities land in our inbox where there are events taking place. So sharing those opportunities with the young people that we work with so they can choose if there's something that appeals to them and they want to. We've just had recently one of our FCC members delivering a workshop at a regional youth event. So things like that. But also, as a grant maker and a funder, we have an evaluation process. So sometimes that involves questionnaires, which I know is not everybody's favourite thing to do. And it's a delicate balance to not over consult with people and give them consultation fatigue. But ultimately, if you don't ask the questions, you can't refer back to the learning, and people move on and roles change, and that knowledge can ultimately be lost if you don't go through that process of asking the questions. So I think HUDL have been great at setting up opportunities for the outgoing members of our FCC to share their insight with us and have sessions where we've just kind of shared any thoughts, but also sending out questionnaires. We have our own questionnaire as well. So just making the most of those opportunities and telling the stories of the work that the young people have been involved with. Ultimately, I think that's the most important thing for us, is that those stories come from their own voices.
And whilst I still have you, Louise, the question that I have is, what advice would you give to other organisations that are at the start of trying to work in this way with young people?
I would say that the most important thing is to be realistic about how much you can achieve initially. It probably surprised me how much resource was needed to do this work in terms of both time and energy. It can be quite stressful work as well. So we talked about confidence. If you are not feeling confident in working with young people, there is much more of a burden of stress and anxiety and responsibility about this work. Sometimes it can feel quite last minute as well. And if the team around you don't have confidence, then you haven't really got anyone to lean on other than HUDL. And without HUDL, we would, be nowhere. We have developed so much more in the 3 years because we've had that knowledge transfer from HUDL. And I would say, if you are delivering a program of work with young people, start as early as you can. Think about what are the foundations that you need to put in place to bring everyone along on the journey. Have you got a board of trustees that you need to work with? Have you got budget that somebody needs to sign off? Are your team confident and ready to work in terms of outside of the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday? It does take a lot of time and energy to do this well and in a way that feels authentic. So I suppose ultimately start small, speak to other people who've been doing it well and have already made the mistakes, and they can help you to avoid them. Easy for me to say with hindsight, but I made the mistakes up front.
Hindsight is a beautiful thing, but I think I do want to kind of speak to the fact that, like, all the questions that you just raised that an organisation needs to ask itself, it's super important to do that before bringing young people in, because, we had the experience of needing to pause in order to answer those questions whilst having the team already in place. So there was a lot of learning there. So as we wrap up today, I want to ask my final reflection question, which is, what are you most proud of and what are you most hopeful about when it comes to the Future Communities Collective? Who would like to start us off?
I'll definitely say what I'm most proud of is what the FCC looks like right now. I feel like it's very vibrant, very, very like packed. It's full of energy, and I feel like I'm hopeful that it continues like this for years and years, keep impacting young people. And I feel like definitely like we see more success stories, of young people coming through the FCC, and it's like a part of their journey, and they really, benefit from being a part of FCC and benefit the Court Foundation and the communities and organizations that we work with and be a part of. I'm really proud of being a part of the FCC and being a part of the alumni network I feel like we have now, and the way it looks and the way it's functioning right now, I feel like it's amazing.
Amazing. Thank you, Zach. That's so beautifully put. Saffai, how about you? What are you most proud of and what are you most hopeful for?
I think I would say just where it is now, just the fact that it's just expanding, and it's always looking for just a space for young people to get involved in, and no matter what age and what lived experiences or anything, HUDL and the co-op have provided that space. They found that niche, so it's really making that change. I'd say that's what I'm really proud of.
Amazing. Thank you, Saffai. Keshon, over to you.
I'm most proud of the impact that we had on both funds. I'm happy that we've successfully concluded both FCF round 1 and 2. Because I said coming in, I hoped that we would go in with the intention to fund the best organizations. And I definitely believe that we have. And yeah, that makes me incredibly proud. What I'm most hopeful for, I hope that when we did the last round of recruiting, I realized that we really attracted some incredibly intelligent candidates. Like this panel, this current team, I'd say definitely blow me out of the water any day. They are incredible. So we've had training sessions led by members of the team on very niche legal points, for example, and youth justice, and it's just incredible how experienced the team is. And I would like to see more young people get involved, young people who you wouldn't expect to be involved in work like this. I would encourage you to, you will not be left unsupported. There's a lot of support here, a lot of encouragement here, a lot of love here, to be honest. It's not a sterile environment. So that's what I'd like to see and what I'm most hopeful about and obviously proud about.
Thank you so much, Keshon. And Louise, finally over to you. What has been your proudest moment, and what are you hopeful for the collective?
My proudest moment is definitely when we heard from people at the recent sort of feedback, both from the outgoing FCC members and the recent check-ins, that this work is making a big difference to people. So whether that's about improved skills, confidence, opportunities, people we know now, are leaving our collective stronger and more capable of leading change. And I could never have hoped for that when we first started this work. So that feels incredibly powerful in terms of some loose intentions to where we are now. So I just want us to continue down that path. And I think, to touch on Keshon's point, providing opportunities to young people who are not represented currently and bring voices round this really supportive and incredible table of our collective, virtual table of our collective, bring different voices round when we do our next recruitment exercise, that we have as many voices represented as possible, and people who would never get involved in this work and who don't even know that it exists. And I'm sure there are lots of people out there who just, would never know that they could be successful and see a real change in themselves through this work.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you all so much. I really it's been such a joy listening and talking to you all this evening. We're going to wrap up, and I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of HUDL Up, and a huge thank you to today's guests for sharing their stories and insights. If you'd like to learn about HUDL, explore our work and the Future Communities Collective, or get in touch about involving young people in your programs, strategy or organisation, you'll find links in the description of this episode. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening now, and join us next time as we continue holding space for real stories, shared power and collective change. See you next time.